I'm Teresa Scorson, and this is Can We Talk? The date is August 5th, 2016, and I have a special guest here today, Herb Davis. Herb, you've been on the show before, but this week we're going to be talking about a very important current issue, policing and police overreach. Herb is a retired law enforcement instructor and was also a St. Paul officer in from 1963 to 72, so he's got lots of background that he can bring to this. And I've got lots of questions. The Black Lives Matter movement has become a very, very important and very high-profile movement. And I want to know, well, first of all, from the point of view of you as an instructor, what do you think about the protocols as they're being taught to police about drawing and firing in situations on the street?
Well, I've been retired now for approximately 18 years. So I'm not sure what they're doing now, if it's any different, but I was very proud to be involved in the training of peace officers. Worked at the Law Enforcement Training Center in St. Paul. And I think the training certainly was amongst the best in the country. Everybody got to role play. They had demonstrations, they had videos of actual traffic stops, actual felony stops, but they also performed their own simulated under pretty realistic conditions. A lot of money is being spent in training peace officers to make the situations or simulations as realistic as possible. Low light, dark, cold weather, wet weather, outside, inside. So I think it's fine. I mean, I don't think that's the major issue that people are concerned about or need to be concerned about. It is a public program. People could go and observe police training in action. It's run through either the VOTEC schools or the community college system or state university system. All of them are public. All of the people would be, I think, flattered to see somebody seriously come and observe.
Interesting. I did not know that it was, although I suppose if I thought about it, I would have realized, yes, it ought to be public, and I'm glad here it is. Lately we've been hearing from police department sources, especially higher up, that part of the problem with policing these days is that police have too much responsibility. And someone suggested they have to be social workers and babysitters and a long list of things that police are expected to provide. And it's too much of a burden, too much of a responsibility for individual officers on the streets.
Well, if you're asking my opinion of that, I disagree with it. I think that the police are the final government agency that delivers a whole lot of services, and most of the officers that I was involved in training are very competent, very service-oriented, well-intentioned, at least as rookies when they start out, they're pretty well-intentioned. I think the people that I've seen making statements that you just relayed are more the conservative, what I would call right-wing, rural law enforcement.
Okay.
The city police seem pretty comfortable getting into a variety of situations, and they're certainly not overworked.
Okay. Well, that's good to hear.
In my opinion.
I actually saw some Facebook opinion about how police officers ought to be on call like a 911 service, like an ambulance or a fire department, that they shouldn't just be everywhere trolling around, that they should come when they're called. What do you think of that?
Well, without being too dramatic, it's nuts.
Don't be dramatic, Herb.
The reality is that so many things that need to be done are done not because people call the police, but because the police interrupt things in action. And the term preventive patrol is there to describe what the police intend to do. If somebody's standing on the corner and beating their loved one, in all likelihood, by the time the loved one gets to the phone or some citizen decides it's time to call, the person could be in serious trouble. Certainly with robberies, it's the randomness of the preventive patrol that allows them quick response time. If they were like the fire department and were coming from a certain location, there'd be safe locations within a block and disaster zones a half a mile away, so that wouldn't work.
I have to agree with you. I thought that was kind of an extreme position to take, but I wanted to hear what you had to say about it. Now let's talk about Black Lives Matter. In general, and the local one, especially the one in Minneapolis, and I don't know if there are any other chapters in the outstate area, but I want to know what you think of the protests, particularly the shutting down of the freeway, the protests at the Mall of America, where they were very unwelcome. Do you think it's okay to arrest protesters? And how far should we go to keep the streets open and the populace comfortable?
Well, I'll start with just a general statement about Black Lives Matter.
Okay, good.
I 100% support their right to demonstrate, and if I were a black, certainly in the metro area, I'd be out there. I know that. I think that the alternative is to keep things bottled up and then deal with riots like we did in the 60s, which makes absolutely no sense. If they can call attention to what they perceive as injustices, and some of them certainly are injustices, in a nonviolent manner, then we should encourage them.
Yes.
That's my basic statement about Black Lives Matter.
Well, how far is too far?
I don't have the answer to that. The answer, though, I think that I want to give to that is violence is too far.
Yes.
Blocking traffic is not something, on the freeway, is not something that I would support, that I would recommend. I've voiced my opinion to people in Black Lives Matter, which, by the way, they do have an active program in St. Paul of Black Lives Matter. And they're pretty cooperative. I mean, the people from Minneapolis, Black Lives Matter, showed up for the St. Paul demonstrations concerning the Castile shooting. Generally speaking, I think they're a fine organization. Violence is too far. I don't like the idea of them shutting down freeways, but I'm not sure that if I was a young black person and another young black person got shot by the police, that I wouldn't be standing out there on the freeway with them.
Right.
So I can understand that. To the extent that should they be arrested or should people be arrested, certainly to keep traffic flowing and to make sure that they're safe and alive, one of the only ways to get them off the road is to arrest them. The courts then usually give them either a nominal fine or dismiss the charges. So it's not like that's anywhere close to too far. In terms of the Mall of America and shopping, I think that's just fine. This is a consumer society, and if you want to get people's attention,
You go where they are.
you go where it matters to them.
Right.
I have same feelings about the airport protests that I had about the highway. One is the safety, and I think it's a step too far, but again, I can understand that they take it, and as long as they are doing what I call civil disobedience with the intention of getting arrested, they're doing it the right way. It's way preferable to riots.
Yes, absolutely. You said something before the camera started rolling about that racism in the police population. Well, you tell us. What do you think of that?
Well, is our society a racist society? I would argue yes. We started out killing the people who were here,
Right.
and then bringing in slaves, etc. And our history is not done with either one of those issues. We hire police officers from a pool called the American people. And we get exactly what we deserve. I think we get in Minnesota, generally speaking, pretty fine people. Like I said, I've done a few things in my life, but being involved in police training, I was really proud of the people that were going into law enforcement. They were so far ahead of where I was when I went into law enforcement. Again, a lot of that has changed since I left training. One of the biggest changes, obviously, is that many of these people are being hired partly because of veterans' preference, and they got that preference the same way people get PTSD, serving in Iraq and Afghanistan and other places.
So you would say that hiring vets is maybe a two-edged sword?
Well, certainly,
Yeah,
but just about everything is, you
I
know.
suppose.
The selection of human beings who will risk their lives for other human beings is more art than science, and they try to make it science.
Yeah.
But it's a very difficult, I think, a very difficult thing. And I think in Minnesota, certainly, we have police to be proud of. And you could probably take out of several thousand police officers, you could probably take maybe 50 to 100 that shouldn't be there,
Yeah.
but they don't have much option now. They're
Right.
in, they're trapped. They got a good paying job with a pension after 20 or 30 years, and they're not going anyplace. So we need to decide how to deal with that 100, but
Well,
the
you know,
rest of them are fine.
we also need to decide how to deal with, I mean, not that you and I, our opinion is gonna make much difference, but as a country, we need to decide what to do with the police once they have overreached, once they have pulled the trigger, shot someone who was not, shot someone unjustifiably. Because now they're just sort of being turned over to internal affairs, as I understand it, and the police themselves are policing one another. And I don't know that that's ideal. We talked a little bit about, what's the word, how do I want to put it? About a special prosecutor, that's what I want. Yeah, what can you tell us about that?
Well, I'll go back to something that you said. The police are policing themselves for all intents and purposes. Doctors are policing themselves, lawyers are policing themselves, priests are policing themselves. If they get too far gone, they come to the attention of the law outside of law enforcement, and they get prosecuted. And I just read on the internet this morning that a fellow was found guilty of manslaughter for the shooting of an unarmed person. So it's not common that that happens. It's much more common they don't get prosecuted. But the possibility exists that the other levels of the criminal justice system can step in and police the police. Again, having been a St. Paul officer, generally speaking, pretty proud of the way the police police themselves. You're dealing with a two-edged sword. They misbehave under tremendously intense, scared to death sometimes situations where they know over something relatively petty they could die. And it's not a real common occurrence, but fear does a heck of a thing to your judgment, and sometimes you make mistakes. You know, and they're truly mistakes. I don't think we can ask people to perform perfectly in those situations. And when they do make mistakes, if the mistake rises to the level of criminal intent, then most people in law enforcement would like to see that dealt with and either pension them out or give them disability pay or fire them outright. But most people in law enforcement are pretty empathetic to how difficult it is to do the right thing 100% of the time when you're scared to death.
Yeah,
Even if you're not realistically scared to death, you can be pretty frightened. So-
you're on high alert. How have cameras in every pocket and involved citizenry changed the way policing is done, or has it?
Can we hold on to that? I want to go back to something.
Okay,
that
sure,
you said.
yes, absolutely.
We'll discuss cameras, but I thought that you mentioned something about some proposed legislation.
Yes.
Okay, and I want to comment on that because in the Minnesota legislature, I think there are some truly fine human beings that are trying to deal with these problems. And before any of the local police shooting issues came up, a senator in Minnesota, Dibble, introduced legislation that would require a special prosecutor be appointed in all police shooting cases to investigate and determine whether or not there'd be charges. That did not pass. It has, in my opinion, very small chance of passing in the current political climate. There's some conservative control of at least one branch of the government. But the appointment of a special prosecutor seems to me to be one of the big things going on right now with the Castile shooting. The families down there raising Cain about that. And the legislation just sitting. I mean, they could, if they wanted to, in a special session, deal with that legislation. And I've commented that I think they should. I don't think they will, you know, but that was an issue that I wanted to make sure we brought up in terms of talking about law enforcement and policing themselves. Very difficult job for the county attorney who depends on them.
They're also intermeshed on a political level in
Well,
those
on a
jurisdictions.
just logistical level, you have to be intermeshed because the police can only do the accusing, they can't find them guilty.
That's true.
They have to have the prosecutor to handle the case. And so he's dependent on them and they're dependent on the prosecutor.
Yeah. So you're saying you think there should be a special prosecutor?
I support that proposed legislation. I think that the family's right to be suspicious. I personally am not suspicious of the county attorney in Ramsey County right now, based on who he is and what I perceive of him. Pretty remote judgment on my part, but he seems like the kind of fellow that's going to do what Freeman did in the shooting in Minneapolis, which was lay it all on the line and make a decision and take political heat for it, because either way you do it,
Somebody's
it's political
gonna be
heat.
unhappy. Yeah. It's true. Okay, well, in that case, can we get, thank you for making sure we got
Get back to the camera thing?
Yeah, has it changed policing?
Oh, I think so, but not much, not too much. In all circumstances, it really does come down to, I'm going to make a mistake if I'm out there as a police officer. I know I'm going to make a mistake. My boss knows I'm going to make mistakes. I'm not going to do quote unquote police work error-free for however many years I work the street. And I'm going to do my best job with the understanding that my supervisor is going to understand that I'm going to make mistakes. And there might be some consequences that might affect my service rating, it might affect my promotion. I might even get suspended if I make a really stupid mistake, but generally speaking, the cameras are no different than the citizens in the past, except that the film has instant credibility.
Right, and it creates a record.
And if you've got a citizen who's got, say, a police record, the argument would be that the citizen's word is biased as all get out, and in some cases they get caught lying.
Oh, yeah,
As
definitely.
just happened recently in Minnesota, made publicity, the guy says the police officer drew his gun on him, they got the camera on the police, or excuse me, in the police car, the dash cam. That proved that the fellow didn't have the gun drawn on him, that he was making a false report, and that happens to be a crime in Minnesota, to make a false claim about a police officer.
So it should be. But Herbie, here's what I'm thinking. I'm remembering the Rodney King incident, where, as you recall, 4 or 5 police officers, I think it was 4, just beat on this young man. And was caught on camera, and that's where this whole trend started of trying to catch the police doing something dirty. In that case, they weren't making a mistake, they were making an attack. You know, I mean, I don't know the whole story of what they had against Rodney King, but you don't need 4 officers with batons just beating the snot out of somebody, no matter who he is or what he's done. In my opinion. Do you see it differently?
Well, certainly I see it differently. I'm not arguing with your view, because your view is exactly the way most people in your position would see it.
Okay.
And I don't know for sure what went through the minds of those police officers in Rodney King's beating, and that's, you know, pretty ancient history. But the reality is that I think those officers were scared for their lives. They were involved in mass civil unrest. I think that much like people in a fight, you know, 2 people get in a street fight or domestic argument or whatever, they go way beyond what they would normally think is rational behavior. And it's fear is much like alcohol, it impacts your judgment. And so they went berserk, if you will, and started beating on the fellow.